Cancer is caused by food.
Really?
70%.
70% of cancer is caused by food.
And sugar is the #1 culprit.
Tell me again the stat on diabetes, how many people have it or are pre-diabetic, and what, I'm uneducated on this, so how many different types of diabetes are there, and how is it caused?
Okay. So type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease. Pancreas fails, it used to be called juvenile diabetes, and you need insulin. You need insulin.
If you have type 1 diabetes, you need insulin.
You need insulin, yeah. Because your pancreas dies. Because your pancreas makes insulin and helps your blood sugar get balanced. That's the blood. It's sort of the gatekeeper that lets the glucose into your cells.
Okay.
So it's really important.
So how does that die? How do
people die from that?
I mean, how does the pancreas die?
Oh, well,
how does it get to that point?
It's an autoimmune, like you get multiple sclerosis or rheumatoid arthritis. It's basically your body attacks your pancreas.
Is that from eating a lot of bad foods?
Well, there's been links to dairy, and actually as a driver of type 1 diabetes. Gluten, 29% of people who have type 1 diabetes have celiac that are undiagnosed. So celiac is a big cause of autoimmune diseases, including type 1 diabetes. So that's a very small number of people, very few. 1 out of 2 Americans have what we call type 2 diabetes. We used to call it adult onset, except now kids as young as 3 are getting type 2 diabetes from drinking soda from the crib. I mean,
my gosh.
I was working when I was a resident in an urgent care center, and this woman comes in for back pain. She's got her baby in a carriage, and I see her feeding this baby this brown liquid in a bottle who's 7 months old. And I'm like, what is
soda?
I'm like, what is that? She said, that's Coca-Cola.
No.
I said, why are you feeding your baby Coke? She said, well, he likes it.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my God, Lewis, my wife showed me this video on social media the other day. It was of a baby, it looked like it was maybe 8 or 9 months old baby, having ice cream for the first time.
Oh.
Having sugar for the first time. And you watch the baby eat the ice cream.
I'll light out.
The eyes, and then the baby grabs the thing and stuffs it in his face. I was like, oh my God, it was just so crazy. And it's highly addictive. So so now we're seeing 1 in 2 Americans suffer from either pre-diabetes
or type 2
diabetes, and that is when you eat too much sugar and starch, and every time you do that, it raises your insulin. Your body becomes resistant to the insulin, and so it doesn't work as well. So you need more insulin, and insulin does what? Insulin makes you hungry. It makes you store belly fat. It locks the fat in the fat cells, and it slows your metabolism. It's like a quadruple threat for your body to gain weight. So it's why we're seeing, and that goes back to what we're growing, right? So why are we eating all this food? It's because that's the food we produce, right? And so that's the other part of the problem. So we have the chronic disease, we have the economic impact, and then we're like, well, why do we have this food? So as a functional medicine doctor, I'm always asking why, right? Well, why are my patients sick?
Because it makes money, right?
Well, no, but I'm going even further. Why I got interested in this, because why would a doctor care about agriculture and soil and all this crap? Because as I was thinking about my patients' diseases, most of them were caused by food and can be cured by food. So I'm thinking, well, if it's
how many are most of them? Is this like 50%, 70%? 80% of anyone that comes into the hospital, or your patients, who has some type of disease or some type of sickness.
I mean, unless it's like an environmental thing like mercury or Lyme or mold, most of the things.
Cancer.
Cancer is caused by food.
Really?
70%.
70% of cancer is caused by food.
And sugar is the #1 culprit. Heart disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's, heart disease, the big killers
are by sugar and food.
Yes.
So if you change your diet, you should be able to prevent
or cure sometimes.
Sometimes cure. Depends how far along things are, I guess.
Yeah.
But you can prevent heart disease, Alzheimer's.
100%. Yes, 100%. I mean, the studies are there.
It's crazy.
Even people who already have Alzheimer's, when they improve their diet, they can wake up
more
and get
functionality back.
So you've got me thinking, okay, well, if the patient's disease are caused by food, what's causing the food? It's the food system. And I'm like, well, what's causing the food system? It's our food policies. Like, what's causing our food policies? It's the food industry that's lobbying Congress.
It's got money.
It's the biggest lobby group in Congress is agriculture and food. By far, like by twice as much as the next lobby group.
By like gas and oil or whatever.
Yeah, exactly, right. And it's like, what? So then I began thinking, well, if I'm going to help my patients, I can't do it in my office. It's like I'm like in the boat, bailing the boat with a hole instead of plugging the hole.
Right. You're not going to the source.
Right. So then I'm thinking, okay, well, what do I need to do as a functional medicine doctor? I need to go to the root cause, right? The root cause and why. And then it became clear to me that it's our agricultural system that's driving so much of the problem. And what we grow has been based on good intentions that were in the 50s and people were hungry. There wasn't enough food. There was a lot of poverty. And so we figured out a system to produce an abundance of starchy calories.
So we can have food.
So we can have food. And we were great at it. And we have cheap, abundant corn and wheat and soy, which are the commodity crops that are turned into industrial processed food, which is now 60% of our diet. And for every 10% of that you eat, your risk of death goes up by 14%. Yeah, so you're
crazy.
So you're basically, feeding Americans a diet we know is going to kill them. The research is so clear on this. There's no scientific debate, and yet we don't do anything about it because we have these dysfunctional food policies. And then the way we grow the food causes climate change. And we'll get into that, but the number one cause of climate change is our food system.
Really?
People don't realize that. I didn't know it. I'm like, it's oil and gas and all this stuff. I'm like,
but what is it? Is it the trucking? Is it the animal feces?
End to end.
Is it
so first of all, deforestation is devastating. Not only do we destroy the soil on which we cut down the trees, but the trees are carbon sinks, so we lose that.
So they're not sucking in the bad air.
They're sucking in
putting
the
out
carbon
good
dioxide, right? I mean, basically, plants suck out carbon dioxide. That's what they breathe. We breathe oxygen; they breathe carbon dioxide. So that's a perfect antidote, right? Yeah. And then the soil also, we're damaging by the way we're farming. We've lost a third of our topsoil. It's responsible, and people don't know this, but of all the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, the loss of soil, organic matter, like healthy, rich soil, is responsible for 30 to 40% of all greenhouse gases currently in the atmosphere since the Industrial Revolution.
Does that mean, why is that? Does it
why?
suck up? Does it suck?
Because soil it can hold more carbon than is in the atmosphere right now. There's 1 trillion tons of carbon in the atmosphere, which is a lot. I don't know, 1 trillion tons, I don't even know how to measure that. And the soil can hold 3 trillion tons of carbon. And how does it do that? It's an ancient carbon capture technology that is available all over the world, that's free that's can be more effective than all the rainforests on the planet, than all the forests and trees on the planet. It's called photosynthesis. And if you have grasslands, for example, like we had big prairies in the United States, they suck down carbon, they breathe it, and they put it through the plants into the roots, feeds the mycorrhizal fungi, which then make healthy soil, feeds the bacteria, and you get this incredibly rich live soil that holds tremendous amounts of organic matter that is carbon, right? I mean, carbohydrates comes from the word carbon, which comes from carbon dioxide.
Wow.
Right? Ding, 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 it all connects. And,
interesting.
And so we've lost,
so if we don't have the soil for it to consume, then it just bounces off back into the air, I guess, and we're just consuming it in other ways.
Yeah, and the soil can hold so much carbon. The UN estimated that if we took the 5 million hectares of degraded farmland around the world, if we took just 2 million of that, and spent 300 billion, which is the total military spend for 60 days around the world, which is not much. 60 days, 2 months of everybody's military spending. We literally could stall climate change by 20 years.
Wow.
Because of putting back the carbon in the soil. And not only that, it holds water. You see, in Iowa and in the Midwest, there was floods that just destroyed 1 million acres of cropland that otherwise could have been fine if the soil could hold the water, but it just sits on the top where it runs through, and we lose all this water. So that when you have organic matter in the soil, it holds 27,000 gallons for every 1% organic matter in the soil per acre. So it's an incredible water sink, it's a carbon sink, and we've lost all these soils, and it's because we're growing these commodity crops in ways that destroy soil. We're tilling the soil, we're turning over soil erosion, it runs off into the rivers. We kill all the life in the organic matter by poisoning it with fertilizer, with pesticides, with glyphosate, herbicides, and it's staggering. And then we have all these sort of unintended consequences. We started growing all this food, and we thought this agricultural revolution was great. All these chemicals are great. Fertilizer's great. We can do all this good stuff. Tractors, big farms, more food, feed the world. It's backfired on us.
Wow.
And it's producing the worst food on the planet that's causing devastating environmental damage, staggering climate change. So it's the soil loss, it's, you said, the deforestation, it's the factory farming of animals, which should be banned.
Right.
It's the transportation, storage, refrigeration, and the food waste. I mean, food waste in...
A lot of waste.
Yeah, well, we waste 40% of our food. We really
That's on our plate, we don't eat it.
Imagine going to the grocery store, buying a bunch of groceries, and getting home and throwing 40% in the garbage. The average American wastes $1,800 of food a year, and it's about a pound a day. And that goes to landfills. The landfills, then it rots and creates methane. So you could be a vegan, throwing out your food waste and scraps, and you could be contributing to climate change. If food waste were a country, it would be the third largest emitter of greenhouse gases after the US and China.
Wow.
Yeah, it's methane to produce. And we need to compost, we need to have community garden, like always to fix it. But it's like when you look at the whole end-to-end food system, it is the number one source of climate change, about 50% of greenhouse gases. And people just don't appreciate that.
So why, I mean, if this information is public and it's out there and policy makers are aware of it, they're not aware of it.
No. I spent 2 hours on a sailboat this summer with a senator, a smart senator.
He wasn't aware of it.
And I literally, his jaw was hanging open the entire time.
Are they not presented with this research and information?
No,
because they got so much money sent to them by the lobbyists, probably.
Right. I mean, listen, if all the people who are walking their office are Monsanto and Cargill and McDonald's and Pepsi and they're all donating millions of dollars, I would say billions of dollars, they're not hearing the other side of the science. And how do you fight that? So I always deride lobbyists, but I plan on I'm creating a food fix campaign, which is a nonprofit, along with an advocacy organization, to start to literally lobby senators, congressmen, key people in the administration around these issues and start to drive policy change.
Because in the UK, and you were talking about, I think in Australia, New Zealand, or I think in Asia, you were saying that you can't do certain things with the food, otherwise you'll go to prison, you'll go to, you'll get killed,
I mean,
like in the UK, they don't have a lot of these dyes, and, right?
Yeah, so it's so funny, the FDA, is so influenced by the food industry, and I was once with the former head of the Federal Drug Administration, Food and Drug Administration, Peggy Hammer. Former. She was, but then she was the FDA commissioner.
Yeah.
But now she's former. And I was at the World Economic Forum. I said, Peggy, how come we have so much trouble with getting advances in food labeling or dealing with toxic chemicals in our food or the antibiotics in animal feed or she's like, well, when we try to make too aggressive change, Congress threatens to shut down our funding because of the food lobby.
They threaten to shut it down?
Yeah.
And then what? If they shut it down, what would happen?
Well, they're limited in their ability to do their job. And so the FTC, the same thing happened. In the 70s, there was a movement by the Federal Trade Commission to have, negative education campaigns around sugar and how bad it was. But the Congress says, we're going to pull all your funding and shut you down if you do this. And so they pull back. So for example, you asked a question about Asia. We have this thing called GRAS, which is generally recognized as safe. So the food additives. We have thousands of food additives. Only about 5% have actually been tested for safety.
In the U.S.
Some of them are grandfathered in, right? Like so Crisco, for example, trans fat was grandfathered in as a safe food to eat. But it took 50 years for researchers to finally prove to the FDA that it wasn't safe because it was the basis of all processed food, right? Crisco shortening. It shortens your life. That's what I call it.
Oh my gosh.
And so they literally had to be sued by a scientist in order to actually turn it into a non-safe substance. And then, of course, they gave the food industry years and years to get it out of the food. So but in this country, there's so many things that are used in our food supply that are banned in Europe, like BHT, butylated hydroxytoluene, food additives, various dyes, and something called azodicarbonamide, which is a softener that makes bread more fluffy and soft.
Yeah.
And it was used in Subway sandwiches. Our friend Vani Hari outed them and said, this is your yoga mat material in your Subway sandwich.
And they got it taken out, right?
Pretended to eat her, and she got it out. But the FDA still says it's fine to eat.
Right.
And in Singapore, if you use it and you're a food producer, you get a $450,000 fine and 15 years in jail for putting it in the food.
That same ingredient.
The same ingredient.
That anyone can use in the U.S. right now.
In the U.S., yes. And most of the things that are safe, quote, safe here are banned in Europe. So it's like, yeah, they're not doing their job. And then antibiotics, we have 30 million pounds of antibiotics are used in animal feed. We have about 37 million total. So about 7 million for humans to treat disease and 30 million for animals. Why? For growth. It's a growth factor.
Right.
It makes them fat. And it makes humans fat too. And it is used for prevention from overcrowding. And the FDA says, well, this isn't a good idea. I mean, nobody thinks it's a good idea. Mm-hmm. But they go, well, would you pretty please not do it? It was a voluntary guideline that the FDA produced, not mandatory.
Please don't do it, yeah.
You have to have a vet certify that the animal's sick before you give them antibiotics.
Oh, man.
And now they continue to do it and just laugh. They had voluntary, the FTC put in voluntary guidelines around junk food marketing. Would you pretty please not advertise the bad stuff and advertise more good stuff? It was just voluntary, and the food industry went ballistic and had it overturned. So even the voluntary guidelines are nullified.
Like, no, wow.
And
sugar. It's like, I'm the first one to raise my hand when I say, like, I love sugar, and it's my biggest vice, right? Like, I love cookies and candies and cakes and brownies and anything you can think of. I love it, right?
We programmed.
I don't know why I don't have diabetes. So much sugar I've had my whole life. But
you can't be having that much because you look pretty good.
Well, I train hard too, right? I go through waves. But as a kid, I would drink like 9, 10 Dr. Peppers a day, I remember.
What?
Like some days in the summer, you're just sitting around.
You could have been president. Isn't that what our president?
Exactly. But I would run around and work out and play sports, but then I would just drink because I thought that's what was on TV.
You were 16, 18. You're like.
And I was like 9, 10, right? So I was like, but it was, you'd see it on commercials like your NBA superstar drinking Dr. Pepper or Sprite or whatever after on the basketball court. And I don't know if it was just like subconscious or just it tasted good and you didn't think about it.
This is where the food industry is so, I talk about it in my book, Food Fix, but the food industry is so strategic about how it advances its mission and goals. And it does it through multiple channels. And I'm just going to go through them because people just don't know. The
celebrity endorsements, right?
Yeah, the first, obviously, celebrity endorsements, which is the obvious one. They co-opt social groups. So they fund groups like the NAACP and Hispanic Federation. The African American and Latino communities are the most affected by diabetes and obesity, and they co-opt them by funding them. I want to show the movie Fed Up at the King Center in Atlanta, and Bernice King, Martin Luther King's daughter, was all about it, and she was excited. But once we got it scheduled, a few days later, I got a call that we couldn't show it. I'm like, why? She says, because Coca-Cola funds the King Center.
No.
Yeah. I went to Spelman College, which is African American Women's College in Atlanta, and the dean said to me, half of the 18-year-olds coming into college have a chronic illness, obesity, hypertension, diabetes. 18-year-old women. And I'm like, why is there soda machines all over the campus? Why? It's just because Coke funds.
No.
And one of the people on the board of trustees is one of the highest executives at Coca-Cola.
Oh man.
An African American woman. It's like, so they co-opt social groups. And that's why they, for example, oppose soda taxes, because they're in the funding of these big soda companies. And then, of course, they fund research. So they fund 12 times as much research, $12 billion worth of research a year to study nutrition. So Gatorade gets studied by Pepsi.
Really?
Gatorade's the best thing in the world. It's not. It's just sugar, right? Or
right.
So it corrupts and pollutes science. So people are confused. Why is there so much confusion about nutrition science? Third, they create front groups. They call them spin doctors. So they create front groups that seem like they're independent groups, like Crop Life.
Yeah.
Or like
and they're tweeting
the Center for Consumer Freedom.
Right.
Or the American Council on Science and Health, which, by the way, is run by a bunch of doctors who suggest that pesticides are safe, that high fructose corn syrup is great for you, that smoking doesn't cause disease, and
why would they do that? Because they get paid a lot?
They're funded by Monsanto and Big Food and Pepsi. You just look at their funders, and they spend $30 million fighting GMO labeling in California. This front group, it was all funded by Monsanto, right? And then you got these front groups, and then you have them co-opting scientists and academies. So the nutrition academies, the American Heart Association, American Diabetes Association, their funding in large part comes from industry. And so the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, which is our main nutrition association, 40% of their funding comes from the food industry. You know, they have sponsored, you know, lectures at their meetings that are, you know, with people saying, well, high fructose corn syrup is good and diet drinks are good, and like,
right.
It's just completely corrupted. And so these professional societies give guidelines, and they're corrupt. And Dr. Ioannidis from Stanford, who's a scientist who looks carefully at the research and conflicts of interest, says, you know, these professional societies like the American Heart Association and Diabetes Association should not be making guidelines. And then, so you've got all these ways in which they sort of screw things up. And then, of course, they are aggressive in advertising and marketing, which is illegal in most countries. And then they have lobbyists running around Washington driving policy that supports all of what they do. So you've got this massive effort, and it's often subversive and illegal. And it's kind of shady.
You want to learn about the key foods you need to eat to master your health? Make sure to watch this video right here.
And stress, all of those are contributing to disease. But by far, the biggest cause is food.
Really?
By far. And it affects, I mean, what's amazing is it's not just like a little bit.